Hello, how are you? Welcome to a new class. This time, we're going to be talking a little bit about version releases and running upgrades on already deployed instances. Well, the inherent to everything that is the release of new versions is going to find it in the repository, precisely OML deploy tool. From here, orchestrates all the rest of the components. As we well know, OmniLid is an application that carries, let's say, an important amount of components. If we open this way, let me find an architecture diagram of components. Here at the beginning, 123 minus 456 minus 789, 1011 minus 1213 components. 1314 is also an application that is in constant evolution, and some more components will surely be added. So, each one of these components has its own repository. For instance, the component or engine or asterisk itself. Every one of these components has its own repository containing the configuration code or the source code and the release notes that each of these components will have separately, where you can track and follow up on the changes that are being implemented in each of the releases. We also have the release notes for each individual release. Each one of these components is going to have a tag inside the repository where you can do that individual tracking using of countless release note, including at the commit level, let's say these open software. So the person who adapts it has the power to even keep track of the lines of code, the things that are being changed back behind each of these components here. There's a repository that exists on GitLab, and there in that repository are going to find the source code, the release notes for each of the change notes for each of the releases, the Docker file to build, the component to make the own buildings of the images, etc. But each of these components is actually orchestrated from the OML deploy tool. The MLA deploy tool is who nucleates to all these components, and it has its own release node, where among other things, and the main part I would say is precisely the combination of versions that are raised for each of the major releases. Here, we are talking about release 1.5, or 1 in OmniLeads 31. When we talk about release 131.0, we are talking about the release of the OmniLeads application as a whole. Now, this application, as we well know, is composed of multiple components. OmniLead follows a development logic based on, I would not say microservices, but services that are treated individually with using their own component, with their own pipeline of building, of testing. And each one of these components, as well as I comment, is coming. It is definitely orchestrated from the deploy tool from Ansible or Docker Compose, which are the two technologies that we were looking at to deploy and orchestrate the application based on these multiple components whose components will have a release format based on a date. If this is the date, year, month, day, and is in the case that there is more than one release per day as well. These are by default in Docker Hub. When you search for OmniLead in Docker Hub, you will find each of the repositories inherent to each component. RTPenguin, for example, has its Docker repositories, and there are its tags, its images. Let's see that there is a correlation between the image that is already binary to be invoked, downloaded in Docker, to be materialized as a container. From the image, we have a date there, the tag of each image. The tag is a date, then suddenly. If I have here an asterisk image, for example, let's see. We were already working with images. We have not touched anything because the inventory file that we materialized was from the inventory file that comes in the repository. This inventory file in each release is updated, and the images, among other things, are updated. We are working with this set of images. That belongs to release 131. Let's go here. 1 and 31, which is the release we are using, contains, for example, the asterisk image, 23,801. That obviously is what we have deployed and what we have in the inventory. I can relate that to the image here in Docker Hub, where it would be this image 28, we said. Sorry, the asterisk image was this 2,310 minus 2,310, 1,601, 23, 10,601, this same one. This image will be related with a branch or a tag repository. Here is the tag inside the repository, individual of asterisks, and here we will have the real node with the changes inherent precisely to this image. Yes? Now, at level or Emra deploy tool, I have the release notes of all components. Nucleates here the release node of all components and the combination of versions in each new version of Omniliads. From now on, we will find changes, or obviously in the release node, announcing all that contains all the changes contained in the new version of OmDelete, the combination of versions of the components. This maps directly against the Docker Compose, the environment point of the Docker Compose, or the... If we are going to work with Ansible, let's notice that we go back here to the root of the repository, and in each release, we will see that our inventory file from the very beginning, it is going to integrate the new versioning of components always, and perhaps some other new variable. There, we make a parenthesis. We must be very attentive to the release notes. So far, it has not happened. But if it appears suddenly of WhatsApp provider, for when we have WhatsApp in OmniLeads, and well, it will appear within the inventory YAML root that brings OmniLeads, from which we manage the copies for to make after our own stock inventories. But this is the one that brings the matrix that brings Omnilets. Inside the folder Ansible is going to have the new versions, and if it comes to appear, some new parameter for the arrival of some new component, of some new channel, and well, they are going to find out in the release node, and what they're going to have to do is copy it, at least inside the general variables, to its file. That is, remember, recapitulating our inventory file, the one that I'm showing here, test QA, this inventory in YAML, we have generated from a copy of the parent inventory that brought the release 1 and 31 back, this file, on which I am basing the stock of all my instances, which we have 3 instances. We added an instance. In horizontal cluster, we are managing 4 instances. We made some parameterizations, some tweaks in the general part of the variables, of course, in the host declaration part. And, well, here in the clustering as well. But, well, this file, which is the heart, which is what we have to treasure, save, is the heart, let's say, of my deploys, of all my subscriber business, of Omniliads in the cloud all of a sudden, or instances that I have deployed there. This file is the result of having copied from the matrix file, which is the one that brings, I repeat, which is the one that brings each one of the releases. Each one of the releases is going to bring this file with the minimum changes in used in terms of versioning. At a minimum in terms of versioning. Maybe in some special release. Very occasionally, some new parameter will appear. In that case, we are going to see it in the release notes, and we are going to have to come and add it, especially if it is exclusionary, if it is mandatory within our inventory that we already have generated. If we are in a Docker Compose environment, and in Docker Compose appears a new release with new versions, well, here in the environment, or rather in the environment point, in the case of if you are already running it, well, back to change a version update. Here, you change directly in the environment point. You put the versioning suggested and excluding so that everything works of the release note of the new version. Here in the release node, I have the versioning. A new Omnilit version came out. I raised my Docker Compose with the previous version. Well, what I have to do is take care of. Change here the version numbers, make a Docker Compose appd back to which the new versions will be taken. Anyway, we are going to do already a specific lab where we are going to show this. Now we are from a more conceptual point of view. Let's go back to the topic of the main component or the orchestrator of all the components, which is OML deploy tool. As we said from here, we are going to have the notes in each release, all the changes, in case there is a change regarding a new component or a new variable to be added, is going to be specified. Well, here we have the version, the set of versions that we have to raise so that the application is coherently configured. Let's say there is a coherence between the expected versions. Between the different components, it is published here. What else? In order not to forget, let's see. In the case of new components coming back, and well, they are going to appear. If we are orchestrating with Docker Compose, they will change. These Docker Compose YML. And there will also be their corresponding release. Note where, if you indicate change the Docker Compose YML, please update it to implement the new functionality or in the new pipeline or the new component. But here, well, these components are the ones that we have as of today. As of today that you're recording this course, this is the stack with all the components to be lifted. This is the array of the environment variables that then are customized, whether it is installed by the first boot installer or we're using it in local environment. This may also appear some new component as well as Kamalio may appear WhatsApp or social networks or bot chat. And well, new parameters are going to appear. All this will be reported in the documentation and supplemented if necessary. In the same course that we are giving is, of course, going to report all this. But well, we have to go a little bit tying up. This is the stack with all the components. At Docker Compose level, here are its variables. From one release to another, there may be changes. You have to be aware. And well, in Ansible as well. When I am in the Ansible root folder, here I have the inventory file. This inventory file, release to release. At least the versions are going to change. These versions, and well, at the level of, as I insist again, at the level of new variables. Well, you have to be attentive to the release notes. Well, with this, I think we more or less clarified what a new release is all about. There can be releases that are exclusively, generally, there's a release rate of 1 per month. In that monthly release, there is usually enhancements. There is usually backfixing. So, is a matter of keeping the updates up to date. That's what is recommended. The project adopted a schedule of releases. Quite a lot, as I say, at least once a month. So, it is not recommended at all to leave the platform out of date. We will see in the next labs how to perform an upgrade, both within the framework of an Ansible-based installation and within the framework of a installation using Docker Compose.